Oh my, you, a daughter-in-law, aren't my family. My mother-in-law Susan declared in a restaurant on our vacation. I told you this is a family trip. Of course there's no seat for you here. Did you really think you were a part of this family? You have such a thick skin. Don't you consider yourself a part of us, you hag? You bring shame. You can't even be a servant. I was the one who organized this fall trip, while she was just blubbering about what she wanted. And I was below a servant? Whatever, I don't want to join you guys anyway. I stood up from my seat. I was very much looking forward to this trip, and never imagined it would turn out this way. But then my mother-in-law, who was supposed to enjoy the trip, ended up crying later on. She was about to get bitten by karma in a foreign country. My name is Kathy. I'm an ordinary working wife. My husband Mike and I dated in university, and it's been 5 years since we got married right after our graduation. We've been together for about 9 years, including our university years. When you are with someone for that long, you start seeing the faults of the other. It wasn't like we were going through a rough patch, but we definitely lost passion for each other. At the beginning of our relationship, Mike always tried to be courteous. After marriage, he considered chores as women's jobs. He repeated shower, dinner, and sleep on weekdays after returning from work, and he lounged around, playing games all day on weekends. I had a job as well, so I wanted him to be more helpful. We often had arguments over the subject at the beginning of our marriage. After a while, I had given up. I'd even come to believe that it was less efficient to have poor help. I supposed all the couples were more or less like us. The world may have been doing its best to promote gender equality, but if you looked at it on a family level, I doubted that such a thing was going to permeate for decades to come. Anyway, Mike's laziness was only a minor problem. There was a much bigger issue. Susan, my mother-in-law. She didn't live with us, but often called and visited us at home. If she meant to spend quality time with us, it would have been appreciated, but not even once she tried. She came for only one reason: to ask me to do some bothersome tasks for her. For example, government-related procedures, arranging trips that I wasn't going, and an invitation to a thorough cleaning day at her house. I had to clean her AC, bathroom, kitchen, and so on. I wasn't there to help, but was made to do everything by myself. In addition to this, I signed up for her phone, an internet provider, and issued a credit card in my name. Other than that, I was used as her driver, and as a nurse to her late mother when it was needed. Fortunately, I wasn't bothered during my work hours, but she didn't hesitate to disturb my private time with some sort of requests. Mike once told me that she was from an affluent family. When she was small, her family business bloomed, and they lived on a large property. She had a nanny who took care of all her needs. And then the business faltered with a change of trends. After the downsizing of the business, her family lived an ordinary life. But she reputedly kept a selfish habit from childhood. It didn't really matter how she became to be herself. Mike should have stood on his feet and made her stop harassing me, but he had never shown a sign of it. Maybe it was my fault for letting her be, just to keep peace in the family. In any case, I was not a servant. It would have been better if I had received even a single word of gratitude, but I only got that in the beginning. She's gotten used to ordering me around with a snap of the fingers, and even complained if something didn't go the way she wanted. It got nothing to do with me if she didn't like the weather on her trip I organized. She also had a stingy side, and never initiated to pay her credit card and phone bills unless I asked her. I didn't see her every day, so when I was busy with my life, I sometimes put off urging her, and then eventually forgot about it. I couldn't tell you how much money I had sponsored her. I used to twist my brain to find a way to make her stop asking me without upsetting her. Despite my feelings, Susan, as usual, asked me for a favor one day. "Hi, Kathy. I want to go on a family trip overseas. Please organize it." As soon as I answered the phone, she started with her request. She gave me the detail as follows. The destination was Barcelona. The length of the trip was 1 week, and the number of packs was 5. Flights must be booked in business class, and a specific restaurant must be reserved. Other than that, she said, everything else was left to my ability. How self-serving. I didn't even know if I was able to take a week off from my work. Even if I did, what about Mike? You know, it's a bit last minute. I don't know if Mike and I can get days off from work. To which she replied with totally unexpected comments. Why should you get approval for a family trip from your company? Mike's okay with it anyway. You should prioritize your family over your job in the first place. I pity your sensibility. She hung up on me. What an imposition. It was the biggest hassle ever. If I didn't follow through on the plan, I shuddered to think how she would treat me in the future. So far, her bullying had been done insidiously in the form of requests, but I wondered if it was to become more blatant. I had no choice but to make travel arrangements, no matter how much I was annoyed. And for once, it wasn't all bad. I was actually looking forward to Barcelona too. It was the first time for me to go abroad on vacation. How could I not be excited? I then asked my boss if I could take some time off. Although he was reluctant, he gave me an okay, because it was an off-peak season. I surveyed tourist attractions meticulously and reserved our flights, hotel, and the restaurant Susan wanted to go to. I was confident that she would not complain. And then the day of our trip arrived. There was Susan, her husband John, his sister Anne, Mike, and me, the 5 of us. I've spoken to Anne a bit before, but in terms of relationship value, it's almost as if we've never met before. Nevertheless, I was made to carry Susan and Anne's luggage under Susan's direction, and I struggled to keep up with the group. It was too difficult to carry a week's worth of luggage for 3 people, including my own. My hands were full, and I couldn't even wipe the sweat from my forehead due to the hard labor. I couldn't resist calling out to Mike. "Hey, help me out here. Take your mom or aunt's luggage." He gave me a displeased expression, but held out his hands to me. Just when I was about to pass one of the luggage to him, Susan called out to Mike from ahead of us. "Mike, don't you take that. This is a family trip, which means we don't have to do any work. You don't need to help her. You should give ears to her instead. It sounded like I wasn't a family member. I glanced at John and Anne, who quickly looked away. They probably felt bad for me, but didn't want to intervene and upset Susan. As for Mike, he happily asked, "Really? You take my suitcase? Do I look like I'm capable?" I raised my voice, which attracted the eyes of strangers around us. Susan remarked, "How embarrassing," and laughed. Feeling ashamed, I kept my face down and carried the luggage. In a short while, I was freed from being a porter after the check-in. Our seat class was business as Susan wished. It was 1-to-1 seat configuration, and the individual seats looked quite roomy. Then I suddenly became concerned about the cost of the trip, hoping they were going to pay for their parts. It was too late to worry about it at the point, so I discarded the thought. The sitting order was Susan and Anne, Mike and John, and myself with a stranger, using the 2 rows in the center. It was inevitable for an odd number of people, but there was no consultation. As a matter of course, I was alone. Although I was at ease on the plane, without having Susan ask me to do something. Mike fell asleep as soon as he sat down, and did not seem to care about me. So I had a lonely 10 hours flight to Barcelona with hardly anyone to talk to. And then we safely arrived at El Prat Airport. When I got off the plane, my mood was lifted by the unfamiliar scent of the air in a foreign place, and I forgot all about my lonely flight. Such excitement was short-lived as we picked up our luggage, and once again, I had to carry the ones for Susan and Anne. I kept calm and endured in silence. It was better than fighting on our first day and having the worst trip ever. With such a thought on my mind, we arrived at the restaurant Susan requested. I couldn't figure out why we didn't leave our luggage at the hotel first, and then headed out. By all accounts, it was easier that way. Anyway, I entered the restaurant happily, thinking I would be released from the porter job for a while. Then I saw Susan waving her hand to someone. I followed her gaze and saw a man about the same age as her waving back. I had no idea who he was and wondered if he was a local. He was sitting at the table I had reserved. Why was a stranger sitting there? Unaware of my confusion, Susan walked toward him. "How have you been, Tom? It's been a long time." Tom? I had heard the name before. I went up to him and introduced myself. "I'm Kathy, wife of Mike. Nice meeting you." When we exchanged a kiss on the cheeks, he looked a little puzzled, then turned a friendly smile on his face and said, "I'm Tom, brother of Susan. I've been living here for a long time, so we've never met before. I might have made you feel uncomfortable by showing up suddenly, but we're a family now, so don't be shy." It seemed like he was a kind person, unlike Susan. That said, there was one problem. If Tom was joining us, the number of reservations should have been changed. Susan was so careless as to not let me know ahead of time. "Susan, if you knew Tom was joining us, you should have told me in advance. I don't think there's a problem to add one more seat here, but I don't know about the other places." She looked puzzled for a moment. "Why do you need to change the number?" she innocently asked. I didn't think I said something strange. I worried that she was showing a symptom of dementia, because there are you, John, Tom, and Mike and me, the 6 of us. Before I could say anything else, Susan made a face that said, "Got it. You see, we don't need to change them. We got enough seats. I told you this is a family trip. Of course there's no seat for you here. Did you really think you were a part of this family? You have such thick skin. Don't you consider yourself part of us, you hag? You bring us shame. You're just a guide. You can't even be a servant." What? Did she just say I wasn't her family? I had done everything she asked me to do. Even though this trip was arranged all by me, I was still seen as less than a servant. Moreover, Mike seemed to not care, even though his wife was degraded in public. "Hey Mike, can you back me up? We are married, but are we not a family?" He frowned as if to say he didn't want to be involved in this. "Of course, you and I are our family, but the relationship between you and my mom isn't really so. And I'm told that you're just a guide on this trip. I thought you knew and came along." "Are you joking me?" He was stunned by an enraged shout, and then mumbled, "Don't get me involved." Other diners around us stared at me, just as the passengers in the airport did. But I wasn't ashamed this time. I was more hurt to be mistreated to this extent. Susan opened her mouth, not bothered that I was struggling to hold my tears back. "Now that you know, get to your duty. Your job is to find a taxi and take all our luggage to the hotel, and then come get us around the time we finish our meal. You can do whatever you like in between." She acted indifferently as usual, and told me as if it were right and natural to do so. I was beyond outraged. I glared at Susan, who treated me like a slave, and Mike, John, and Anne, who couldn't think for themselves, and neither agreed nor denied it. "I'm leaving. I don't care about you guys. You have Tom, who lives here, so you can manage without me." I decided to walk away from them at this point. Then Susan yelled at my back, "Wait a minute. What about our luggage? At least take them to the hotel. Why do you think I let you come along?" I ignored her and grabbed a taxi to the airport. I booked a return flight on the way there. While I was waiting for my flight, I kept crying from the devastation and despair that Mike or people didn't see me as a family member. I might have made other passengers around me uneasy, but my heart was so torn to shreds that I couldn't care less. Then my phone started ringing. I wasn't in no mood to talk to anyone, so I didn't check who was calling. But the phone didn't stop ringing for a long time. When I finally picked up, it was Mike. I thought maybe he wanted to apologize. No, it couldn't have been. "Hey hon, can you come back ASAP? Tom got upset with my mom and left, and we got kicked out of the restaurant. We don't know what to do now. Family is supposed to help each other, right? So please." Apparently, Tom was a decent man, as I expected him to be. I asked him to elaborate. Tom didn't like Susan and Mike's attitude toward me. "I'm disgusted. I don't want to spend any more time with you people." He yelled at them and left the restaurant. In addition, the waiter kicked them out for being a nuisance and creating a scene, and they were at a loss for what to do next. Now, how did we ever get from the airport to the restaurant? That was because I interacted with locals in Spanish. I had never taken a vacation overseas, but I often had business trips to Spanish-speaking countries. Therefore, I learned conversational level through study and experience. When things went rough, they wanted me as a family member. My sorrow and despair evaporated in thin air. Karma caught up with them. I reluctantly decided to tell him the location of the hotel, in Spanish. The name of the hotel is ABC, located about 20 minutes from the restaurant by taxi. What? What are you saying? I don't understand. Speak English. I'm telling you nicely. It's your fault that you guys didn't do any prep work in the first place, you know. You guys said I wasn't a family member. So I don't care what happens to you. You're not my family anyway. While I was speaking, Mike hysterically screamed nonsense at me. Then Susan took over the phone. Kathy, Mike is trying hard, but why are you not helping him? A wife is supposed to be devoted to her husband. Come back. Fulfill your duty, you useless hag. She was out of her head. Even though we spoke the same language, the conversation was not going to happen. I knew it well, and it was time for my boarding, so I wasn't gonna waste any time on her. Get lost, I said in Spanish, and hung up on her. Then I immediately started the process to cut off her cell phone and credit card. A sequel to the story. Susan and company had wandered around in the city of Barcelona until they met a kind English speaker who helped them with scheduling the flight. But during that time, they were troubled by vicious rip-offs and pickpocketing. Because of that, the cash they had brought with them was almost gone. I was so glad I had cancelled Susan's credit card. I left my wedding ring and the contact detail of my divorce lawyer in the house I lived with Mike. I searched for a seasoned divorce lawyer as soon as I returned. I was determined to fight with Mike, but he easily agreed to the term. He not only lost a lot of money during the trip, but he had resigned from work, so he had no financial means to hire a lawyer for himself. When Susan approached him about the trip, "You can find a job once you're back. Even if you can't have Kathy, you can be a stay-at-home husband. A family trip is more important." He had been talked into it. Unbelievably moronic, right? Anyway, I quickly became a free woman thanks to this. Mike lost most of his assets due to alimony and property division, and he's now working like a horse. Susan heavily relied on me for various procedures, so she has no clue what to do with them now. She fell behind or failed to pay credit cards and taxes, and her life is starting to fall apart. They should sink to the bottom at once.
My mother-in-law treated me as her slave at her birthday party and lost everything in the end.
How dumb can you be? But Betty, don't you dare call me by my name, you scum! I'm hated by my mother-in-law, although she is a mother of my love. When I lost my parents, I swore to love my in-laws. Contrary to my promise, my relationship with Betty isn't going well, and if anything, it's only causing me more pain. I wonder how this started. I didn't get married to spend a life in this way. Bullied by my mother-in-law, but I can't tell my husband, and I'm mentally reaching my limit. What saved me is the appearance of an unexpected person. My name is Maya, 28 years old. I graduated from a state university with a nursing degree and followed in my mother's footsteps to be a nurse. Growing up, watching her work in the hospital, I dreamed of helping many patients one day. I had good knowledge of medicine, so my friends often consulted me about their health. On one occasion, I gave first aid to a passenger who collapsed at the train station and called an ambulance. It was all thanks to my mother's strong sense of justice that I inherited. It was my belief that if someone was in trouble, I didn't hesitate to give assistance. 2 years after I became a nurse, my mother suddenly passed away from a heart attack. In a single-parent household, my mother was more important to me than anything else. I couldn't even repay her for raising me single-handedly. When I found a job, I thought I would give back to her little by little. Just then, she was gone. After my mother died, I hated everything, and I even thought about quitting the job I loved so much. In the end, I didn't quit because of him. It was Cam, my husband. When I just started working, he was a rehab outpatient. He was somewhat easy to talk to, and I could interact with him without feeling self-conscious. He didn't have any major illnesses, which worked in our favor too. He was light-hearted and gentle, yet dependable. Eventually, he asked me for my number, and we started seeing each other on a regular basis. We got married after 2 years of dating. I got a new family after I had been lonely without my own. I was losing hope, but his presence made me want to try again. However, the marriage wasn't all happy. I was bothered by something right after I started my new life. That caused my trouble was my mother-in-law Betty. She was far out from the mother figure I envisioned. Initially, Ken and I were living together in his apartment. About 2 weeks into our honeymoon, Betty paid a surprise visit. She told me, "Maya, I'm not feeling so well these days." I was obliged to listen because I knew she was relying on me as a nurse. "Oh no, what's exactly wrong?" "Not really about my health, but I'm concerned about my living situation. My husband and I are alone, so I worry if anything happens." "Well, when you need help, you can always call me." "But maybe we get worse while calling you. Maybe we die while waiting." If it comes to that, you need to call an ambulance." Then she gave me a bright smile and uttered unexpected words. "So Maya, let's live together." "What?" It was such a sudden request that I didn't know how to reply. She continued talking cheerily, while I was just flabbergasted. "You're a nurse, so I feel safe when something happens." "Wait, I can't decide on such a big thing right away." No, I'm not telling you to move in now. But I'm not getting younger, so it's better sooner than later." "I see. You'll be freed from paying rent, so isn't it better for you too? Please think about it." She left looking satisfied. Since then, I received numerous calls from her asking about the move. I thought about consulting Ken, but he happened to be in the middle of the peak season at work and didn't seem to have time to discuss such an important matter. Just as I was contemplating, he mentioned, My mom told me, but are we supposed to move in with her sometime?" "Really?" "She sounded quite happy about it. She said she felt safe having you with her." "Wait a minute. She's getting carried away on her own." "Oh yeah? We both work, so I think it's not a bad idea. Your housework will be lighter, you know." He had a point. Having a double income was financially beneficial, but the chores became poor. I often had no energy to cook dinner after work, so I prepared TV dinners or had takeaways. Ken always said he didn't mind, but I was skeptical. Once I started thinking about it, more and more concerns piled up in my mind. I came to think that it might be best to move in with the in-laws for him. As a result, I reluctantly agreed to Betty's request. Thus, just 2 months after our marriage, we started living with my in-laws. At first, Betty treated me as kindly as she could. "Thank you so much for moving in with us. We are grateful to have an excellent daughter-in-law like you. I will take up the chores so you can focus on your work now." That being said, part of me expected that my life was going to be easier. But in reality, instead of becoming easier, what awaited me was living in hell. Just 1 week after I moved in, her attitude toward me took a drastic turn. She began discreetly bullying me. "Hey Maya, are you really going to depend on me for all housework?" "I don't intend to. I do cleaning and washing on my days off." "Huh. Who do you think you are? Isn't that a little unfair, you being a daughter-in-law?" "No, I don't mean to." "It's obvious. You put everything on my shoulders and just want to make money for yourself. So sneaky." My mouth was agape to hear such an accusation from her. Who said all the housework was going to be taken care of in the first place? Since then, I tried to help her as much as I could. I prepared breakfast and did laundry before going to work. If I got off work on time, I cooked dinner. Every time it was for Ken, Betty, and my father-in-law, the 4 of us. I had come to regret that my life with Ken alone was so much easier. As a nurse, my days off were random. Ken was a normal office worker, so our days off coincided only a few times a month. I was off on a weekday and planned to go out for the first time in a while that day. I finished the chores and went to find Betty in the living room. "Hey Betty, I'll be out for a bit." "What? Where do you think you're going?" "Just going to a mall. I have to buy a birthday present for my colleague. I will be back soon." All of a sudden, Betty turned red, fuming. "What the hell did you say? Going shopping? You got a nerve for a daughter-in-law." Once she became hysterical, it was out of my control. She lost her temper and lashed out at me with her personal point of view. "It's not fair that you get to go out. You can't even do your chores right, and you think you deserve to go out? If you have time to hang around, get to your housework." She showed such a temperament only in front of me, and acted so gently in front of Ken and her husband. Gradually, her hostility escalated, and she even began to complain about my work. I was pressured to quit my job just 4 months after moving in with her. When I spoke to Ken about my resignation, he was concerned, but I still couldn't tell him what was going on. I only said that I was worn out and needed a break, to which he agreed. I loved my challenging job, but I was mentally exhausted that I couldn't face my work properly. It was all a ploy by Betty. The next thing I knew, she was controlling all aspects of my life. Was I going to be her puppet as long as she lived? Was I going to let her dominate me forever? Although I struggled, she showed her malice only when we were alone. I planned to record her bullying for proof, but I got too nervous when it came down to it and didn't work out in the end. One day, she informed me that she was having her 6th birthday party at home. That was the day she told me. "Can you hold on and think for a minute?" I hastily tried to change her mind. "It's too crazy to prepare for a birthday party now." "What's crazy? You go and get a birthday cake and start cooking." "But..." "Hush, you jobless skank! You're my slave. Do what I tell you. I already have invited my friends." She cheerfully changed it into her elegant dress and began putting a lot of makeup on her face. If her friends were coming, failure to comply was not an option even more than usual. I hurried out to buy her cake and to a supermarket and then rushed back and prepared salads and sandwiches and decorated the cake. When all was ready, Betty's friends started showing up. I was about to open the front door to welcome them in. "Stop! Don't just show your face to my friends, okay?" "But I should at least greet them." "No need of greeting from a jobless skank, aka slave. Go and clean the hallway and the stairs. My friends would pass on the way to the bathroom." "Fine." I cleaned as she ordered. Then one of her friends, Wendy, popped her face out to the hallway and asked, "Hey Betty, who is that cleaning?" "Oh yeah, her. She's my daughter-in-law Maya." "Has she done some wrong to you?" "Not at all. She looks very eager." "Eager? No way. She had to be ordered to clean by me." Wendy was a name I had heard quite often from Betty. I continued to polish the hallway, feeling my face burning in shame at the thought of exposing my abomination to her friends. Seeing me like that, Wendy asked again, "Hey Betty, how long are you gonna make her do that?" "Until it becomes immaculate and everyone arrives." "But it's like..." "Don't worry, Wendy. She's more like a slave than a daughter-in-law." As soon as she mentioned the word, the room fell silent. While everyone seems to be taken aback, she looked down and started yelling at me, probably to show off her status. "How useless are you?" "But Betty..." "Don't you dare call me by my name, you skank." "I'm sorry." I didn't understand why I was being treated this way in front of her friends. Then Wendy rushed toward us and slapped Betty's cheek. At that second, the status of Betty and me switched. Betty was trembling from shock and anger. "What did you do that for?" screamed at Wendy with a burning face. Wendy calmly answered, "I'm disappointed in you. I thought we were good friends." "So why did you slap me? Such a savage act." "Who is a savage? You mistreat the person who saved my life so terribly." "Saved your life?" Betty stared at her dumbfoundedly. I was totally lost when Wendy smiled at me and said, "It's been a long time. You're the nurse, right? Do you remember me?" "I'm sorry, but have we met before?" "It's been a few years. You saved me at the train station." "Train station? Oh my god, that lady!" She was the one I assisted on a platform a while back. I remember giving first aid to her, who was unconscious at the time, and calling for an ambulance while frantically talking to her. I suppose she remembered the whole thing. She must have vaguely remembered my face and voice, and maybe asked the hospital about me later. I'd never imagined that I was going to meet her again in such a circumstance. I was surprised, but Wendy happily continued her story. "I thank you so much for your help. I still remember you holding my hand and talking to me until the paramedics arrived. I'm so glad that you made it. I owe it to you. I've been hoping to thank you in person, but never imagined you're in such a terrible condition." Her words prompted the other friends to coldly stare at Betty. When Betty noticed, her face immediately turned white. Desperately trying to regain her position, she raised her voice. "No, no, no! Don't take it wrong. Slave, but she initiated it on her will, and I've never told her to be one. Believe me." No matter how hard she tried to justify herself, no one believed her any longer. Wendy lashed out at her. "You're the worst kind to treat this honorable woman in such a terrible way. She's the wife of your precious son, isn't she? Yet you call her a slave? You have no compassion." "Wait, Wendy, I don't mean to." "Then how do you mean?" "I remember her thriving and glowing with full of life back then, and now she looks so pained. I have no doubt you took the life out of her. Apologize to her now." "What are you waiting for?" Betty shed tears being scolded by Wendy, and resentfully apologized to me. The birthday party was a mess afterward. Everyone changed the way they looked at Betty. Discovering her true nature, they left one by one. Wendy stayed back and explained the whole ordeal to Ken and my father-in-law. All the facts came out, and Betty's malice was exposed. My father-in-law was outraged and immediately demanded a divorce. "Get out of here now!" he scolded Betty, who frantically apologized in tears. It had become an uncontrollable chaos. My father-in-law hired a divorce attorney the next day, and Betty was kicked out of the house. She had been a penniless housewife and lost her home and family at once. What kind of life she was going to lead from then on? I didn't want to imagine how miserable it was going to be, but I had no sympathy for her. She had planted the seed on her own. As for me, I still live with Ken and my father-in-law. I'm working once again and living a fulfilling life. Ken still seems to be remorseful. He must be feeling pretty responsible because he often speaks to me with a gloomy expression. "I'm really sorry, hon, about my mom." "Let it go now. I got to meet Wendy anyway." "By the way, are you going to dinner with her soon?" "Yeah, she's taking me to her favorite restaurant." "Well then, let me pay for it." "Yes, thank you, hon." Winnie and I became good friends after the incident. I never thought that what I naturally did to help back then would turn around and come back to me in such a good way. I'm assured now that my way of life is not wrong. With this in mind, I will live on.
My mill called me out of my mother's funeral. When I got to her house, she ended up losing everything.
Your mother passed away? So? Haven't I told you last week that I got a big gathering with relatives here today? I was shocked by what my mother-in-law said. Well, I'm in the middle of her funeral right now. None of my business. Get here ASAP. I'm having once-a-year party, and I'm short-handed here. I was too hurt that I almost burst into tears. My mother passed away at a young age of 53. My mother-in-law was trying to pull me away from saying my last goodbyes. Her reason was just for the once-a-year party. But her voice on the phone sounded serious, like she hadn't said anything wrong. If I didn't comply with her, I shuddered to think what kind of harassment awaited me in the future. Suddenly, I'm on my way. I replied in a trembling voice and let my tears flow freely. My name is Wendy, 27 years old. My husband Paul and I just got married this year. He is a ceramic designer at a tableware brand. It was just a coincidence that he and I, who was an admin assistant, crossed the path. Paul happened to be free and brought a document that normally passed through the finance department to the admin office. That's how we met the first time. He is from a family of artists. His father, Tom, is a painter, and his sister and brother also work in an art-related field. I wondered if I would fit in well with such a family without having much of an artistic sense, but they welcomed me warmly. Well, not all of them to be exact. There is one person who is displeased with me for suddenly appearing and settling with her son. The person with resentment is Debbie, my mother-in-law. She's been especially fond of Paul, who is the most talented among her children. When he was still at university, she tried to control his future by interfering with his job search and even his dating life. She even tried to set up a marriage while he was still a student, which is hardcore. He thought she was a nuisance, so he rejected all her suggestions, get a job on his own, and decide to marry me. It's kind of a defense against his mother. Given that, it's not difficult to imagine that she loathes me. Every time she and I meet, you came too, wearing another out of fashion. I'm ashamed to see my daughter-in-law walking around in public, looking like that. Oh God, Wendy, what makes you think you can just sit there and do nothing? She would make a sarcastic remark after another as much. If I try to help as I told, she complains about my every move and makes me feel so small. Fortunately, Paul and the rest of the family don't just watch it happen. My mom's treatment of you, it's so terrible. I'm going to the upcoming memorial services by myself. Whatever she says, I'll just make up something. I'm very sorry about my wife. She still carries the resentment about not being able to control Paul. I'll scold her too. But if she doesn't change, don't worry about coming here. Paul and my father-in-law Tom both look out for me and make arrangements so that she and I would have as little contact as possible. Minimal visits to in-laws. When I'm there, Paul never leaves my side to protect me from Debbie's sarcasm. From her point of view, that adds more oil to the fire. But since she's been warned by Tom and Paul, she couldn't say much to me. Seriously, you were so good at fooling Paul and Tom. So far, I've been able to escape her sarcastic attack with only a little remark. How's it going, honey? All good here. How about you? Not overworked? Yeah. I'm quite busy, but what to do? I miss you and your home cooking. If you work hard, you'll be rewarded with whatever you want to eat upon your return. It's already at night there? Have a good rest and be ready for tomorrow. Thanks. I'll go sleep now. I sighed as I hang up the international call. Paul's business trip abroad was suddenly decided last week. He was told that the designer had to supervise the work at a manufacturing plant overseas. It wasn't unusual for him, but it was the first time decided so suddenly that preparations were hectic. He normally rented a portable Wi-Fi or similar if he was going to be on a long business trip. But this time, he was too rushed to get it done at the last minute. Until it was ready over there, the only time to contact him was when he had Wi-Fi in the hotel room. I was supposed to be alone for a while, so I planned to stretch my wings and visit my parents for the first time in a long time. Then, my phone I just put away rang. Wondering if it was Paul again, I saw a strange number on the screen. Even though I was reluctant, I answered the call. My mother? It was from the hospital where my mother was taken to after the car accident. I can't remember exactly what happened after the call. When I arrived at the hospital in a rush, my mother was lying in a bed with so many tubes hooked on the machines. The doctors tried everything they could, but she passed away on the night of the accident. She had my brother and me at a young age, and after my father passed away, she raised us alone. She was only 53 years old. My older brother, who got there late, fell down on the floor in tears after seeing her corpse. The driver of the other vehicle got down on the floor and apologized frantically. No matter how much he did, she wasn't going to come back. I couldn't give him my forgiveness then, and just watched him in silence. After all the paperwork was done, my brother decided to be the chief mourner. she had never been a fan of big events in her life, so we thought she wouldn't have liked a grand funeral. We only called close relatives and friends and arranged a humble farewell. Of course, I called Paul right away. Oh no! What to do? I'll arrange my return. Don't worry. My brother is taking care of things. If you come back now, it'll create a big dent in your work. My mom respected your work, so she won't be happy if you did that. Well, okay. She was so kind to me. I wish I could have been there to say my farewell. Anyway, I'll try to get my work done ASAP and come home sooner. Okay, hon. Don't push yourself too hard. He and my mother had a good relationship. I could hear him fighting back tears on the other end of the phone, and I almost cried along. The wake and the ceremony went smoothly, and the burial was to be done next. My brother and I were both slumped with so many things to take care of. We didn't even have time to just mourn. My mother's coffin was placed in a hearse, and we were waiting for the procession to begin. Then I realized that my phone in my bag had numerous missed calls. I thought those were from my mother's friends, as I've already received many. Although I was fortunate to know there were so many people who cared about her. It was difficult to answer to all once the ceremony started. I decided to take the call, which just came in, and turn off my phone afterward. I ran to the side of the church and answered my phone. Yes, this is Wendy. Hi, Wendy. What are you up to? The deafening high-pitched voice hurt my brain. I pulled my phone away from my ear and checked the screen. There it was, the name of my mother-in-law. I had Paul inform his family about my mother. Tom had a family engagement, so he didn't come to the ceremony. Instead, he attended the wake the day before. Then I remembered he came along without Debbie. I wasn't surprised, as I expected her not to show up to the funeral of the mother of her resentful daughter-in-law. What am I up to? I'm in the middle of my mother's funeral. Oh, right. I think Tom mentioned something about it. By the way, I'm short-handed over here. Come and help me ASAP. Come over now? I've told you there is a big gathering of my family today before. Did you think you didn't need to join because Paul was away? Wishful thinking. I tried hard to explain the situation, but she was determined to have me there. In the end, she asserted, So, what if your mother's dead? You got more important things to do here. Don't you play a heroine of the tragedy. She stabbed my heart with such force. It was the very last moment of funeral with my mother. But if I didn't comply with her, I shuddered to think what kind of harassment awaited me in the future. I told my brother that I had some errands to run and drove off in a car. Fortunately, the in-laws' house wasn't so far from the church. I didn't even try to wipe my tears off and just maneuvered the handle. When I entered the in-laws' house, all the relatives were startled. No wonder, as I was in a plain black dress suit in a group of the cheerfully dressed crowd, and anyone could tell that I had been crying. Debbie rushed over to me, not caring everyone was watching, and she spoke in a loud voice. Finally, you're here. It's been hectic without enough help. At such an important time like this, making excuses about your family and stuff. I wonder if you have any sense of being a daughter-in-law of this family. In a situation like mine, who cared about your party? Wendy? With no energy to argue, I was about to be dragged into the kitchen by Debbie. But I stopped when I was called from behind. I turned around to see one of the relatives with whom Paul had some business interactions, looking at me with a surprised look on his face. He seemed to find it hard to believe that I was there. Why are you here? Before I could answer him, Debbie quickly intervened. I called her up in a hurry because there weren't enough people in the kitchen. Wendy tried to bail out with the excuse of some family stuff, even though everyone has gathered here. How dare she make up a lie in front of me? But your mother is Heather Williams, right? Yes, right. My company informed me that she passed away, and there is a funeral today. I was told that the outsiders weren't allowed to attend, but prepare a condolence message. I am truly sorry for your loss. This happened so suddenly. Thank you. Debbie looked puzzled at the exchange between me and the relative. She seemed to be totally at loss. The relative gave me a pat on my shoulder, scowled at her. Debbie! Dragging out a person who just lost her mother like this is indeed heartless. He sternly scolded her, suddenly yelled at. She didn't seem to have a grip on reality and looked around pleadingly with blinking eyes. But all the relatives around us seemed to have known about my mother's obituary and gave her a cold stares. But wait, why? Why do you all know about her mother's passing? Of course, the death of the famous potter is the top news in the industry. My mother had made a name for herself as a potter for several years. It was originally one of the hobbies she took up when my brother and I became independent, but she quickly developed the talent for it. She became an up-and-coming craft artist whose name was known in the industry. Paul, who works for a tableware brand, and Tom, who was a painter, knew about and interacted with her. But Debbie was the only one who wasn't aware of it. In any way, it was easy to find out my mother was a potter with a click of a search. And I wasn't intentionally hiding the fact. It was just that she had no interest in me and never tried to get to know me. Most of the relatives from Tom's artsy family side were also involved in the art scene. There was even a few of them who offered to attend the funeral, but I had to turn them down for the reason being a closed ceremony. You didn't know that Wendy was the daughter of Heather, did you? In any case, you were an awful mother-in-law. She's clearly grieving. Yet you forced her to come to this meaningless gathering. The buzzing relatives were all judgmental towards Debbie. No, I didn't mean. Debbie looked flustered. Tried to say something in her defense, but her words were all jumbled and incomprehensible. Hearing the commotion, Tom rushed towards us through the crowd. He looked startled at the sight of me, and then immediately glared at Debbie. Debbie, what have you done? No, Tom, I didn't. Wendy. Tom turned to me, ignoring Debbie's mumble, and said, You better go back to the funeral now. I am so sorry, Wendy. She troubled you at a difficult time. He gave me a warm hug and prompted me to leave. I hastily walked out of the house toward my car. No. This is not what you think. Please, listen. I heard Debbie's desperate scream coming out of the house, but I could care less at that point. I drove as fast as I could to the ceremony and was able to see my mother's coffin lowered into the ground. My brother was a little upset that I had left him alone to deal with everything, but I told him what really happened. What a pain in the butt! He was sympathetic and even seemed to be holding back his anger. A few days after the burial, Paul was able to finish his work and returned. We went to the gravesite to pray together. He deeply mourned my mother's passing, saying that he had respected her craftsmanship even before we met. Since the incident, Tom demanded a divorce from Debbie. He had been troubled by her, who tended to be vain and out of control, just because she was a wife of a famous artist. When he was shown the insane behavior of pulling me out of a funeral to help at her party, he became completely disgusted with her. Debbie, who quit her job after marrying Tom and had been living a comfortable life as a housewife, is baffled and is resisting the divorce. Paul says if it went to trial, she would have no chance. Debbie had spent a large sum of Tom's saving in vain, and he has kept all the bank settlements as proof. I wonder if she would be able to make ends meet on her own after living a comfortable life as a housewife. But I remind myself that there is no need for me to worry about her. Our plan, my sister and brother are planning to move, so my mom won't come and bother them. Wow, seriously? She's been a pain in the neck to everyone in her family. By the way, hon, if you don't mind, shall we move too? During the business trip, I was asked to work there. You mean in Paris? Yeah. I know it might be a lot of trouble for you, but I'm astounded by the sudden, such a big suggestion. Relocating in Paris. It doesn't sound real to me. I have my mother's grave to take care of, and of course my work. So it's hard to decide right now, but sure, if you want to give it a try, I'll go along with you. I want to trust the person next to me. If my mother was here, she would push my back and say, "You go and take care of him." At his side. New life in a new environment. With this thought, I feel my gaze naturally look straight ahead. My mother's death was painful, and the series of events that followed was like a storm. By overcoming them, I will walk forward with Paul at my side.
My mill, jealous of me buying a new car, dumped garbage all over the car, but it was someone else's.
I was heading to my car in the garage. When he came into my view, I was so startled that I let out a loud cry. What the hell? Food scraps were strewn all over the car. They were even thrown inside. A waft of stench hurt my nose from the humidity when I opened the car door. I covered my nose and mouth with my hands. That's what you deserved. With the voice, my mother-in-law appeared from the shadow like in the horror movie. She had been jealous of me buying a new car for a while, so I quickly understood this horrible act. I closed the door and moved away from the car in desperation. I knew she was planning to harass me in some way, but I never thought to this extent. But this is Joe's boss car. No! She committed the fiasco as an attempt to harass me. I couldn't help but think to myself, what an idiot. I'm Maria. a 28-year-old working wife. I currently live with my husband as well as my parents-in-law. My job is an admin assistant at a real estate agency, but in truth, I once dreamed of being a piano teacher. I had no choice but to give up, because it required early childhood education in order to join the company I wanted to. After failing to get into my first choice of music school, I went to a university which offered only general music and vocal performance majors. I got a job at my current company as an office worker after graduation and met my husband Tim, who was 2 years older than me at work. When we got married after 2 years of dating, I changed from full-time to part-time. We bought a brand new house, initially thinking the two of us would live alone. But before we had time to enjoy our newlyweds life, my in-laws moved in. My parents want to move in with us because their house is getting old. That's okay for you, right? What? He suggested as a matter of course. I was too astounded to make a protest. Why so suddenly? He responded nonchalantly to the question that finally came out of my mouth. I told you, their house is old. It's gonna cost a lot of money to renovate, so it's better for them to just move in with us. They can take half of our mortgage payments too. It's a win-win situation. Don't make such a big decision by yourself. We didn't buy this house with that intention. It's too small. You, my dad, and I work, so we probably can renovate or rebuild a house in a few years. That wasn't my point. He didn't even ask me. And just because their house was old, they brazenly planned to move in. I wasn't happy about it at all, but he just shrugged it off. Joe, my father-in-law, still worked, but of course he wasn't that young. By the time we upgraded the house, he was going to be around retirement age. Then the burden of the cost wouldn't have fallen on us. We just bought a new house, but we are already talking about upgrading? I was against the idea to the end, but I was completely ignored, and my in-laws moved in as a matter of course. The four of us began to live together. At first, my in-laws showed her gratitude and humble sides, but soon they made themselves comfortable. Before I knew it, the responsibility of the housework was put on my shoulders even though I had a job. Neither Tim or Joe helped me at all, thinking it was normal that I, who worked part-time, should do it and not they, who worked full-time. Nancy, my mother-in-law, said she hurt her back and didn't even help me in the kitchen. Furthermore, she started harassing me on the grounds of jealous, and I had an income and savings compared to herself. She used various tactics to cause me headaches. For example, she purposely placed a glass with a drink on the edge of a coffee table while I was vacuuming. She waited for me to move or bump into it and knock the glass over. Then when I was caught in her trap, and the drink spilled all over the place, she gave me a disapproving look with a smirk. Oops, my bad. I put it on the edge. Isn't serving drinks to your boss a part of your job? Then you must be used to cleaning up spills. Hurry, it's gonna stain the rug. She just watched and laughed at me as I rushed to get a rug and wiped. At those times, I got frustrated that I yelled at her harshly. I told you so many times before not to put it on the edge. Oh my God, are you blaming me? You're terrible. You did it, not me. You purposely put it there for me to knock it over. How dare you? She suddenly menaced at me and started ranting. You falsely accused me for your mistake. That's insulting. It's terrible to blame others. You point finger at me when it's your own fault for being clumsy. Stop playing the victim. You can't even do anything right to begin with. I wonder how you're holding your job. I envy that your office is so patient with you. If I were your boss, I would have fired an useless employee like you immediately. You can't cook, can't clean, and can't even wash clothes properly. It was just so wrong for her to say such things to me when she didn't work and didn't do her chores but just sat around at home all day long. I felt ridiculous to deal with her, so I told him that night instead. But he just shrugged off my distress signal. I'm not sure that's true. I doubt that she's the kind of person to do such a thing. But it happened more than once. She keeps doing the same thing over and over. And she doesn't even help me with any housework. She just eats snacks and spills crumbs all over the place when I'm cleaning. Don't make a fuss about the trivia thing. She's still in pain from her back injury. I'm sure she wants to eat snacks time to time too. How can you tell her she's not allowed to do that? Put yourself in her shoes for a minute. You of all people should try to put yourself in my shoes. Even though I pleaded almost in tears, he was unaffected. Joe, too, must have been aware of what Nancy was doing to me, but he chose to turn a blind eye. Even when I was right next to him being harassed by Nancy, he never intervened. It became too depressing to stay at home, so I got my chores done early in the morning when no one else was awake on my days off. I stayed out during the day and refreshed my mind by playing the piano that was placed for anyone to play in town. As I played, people gathered around me and even applauded at the end. I always felt reinvigorated then. On one of my days off, when I finished playing and stood up to leave, an old man came up to me. You sound excellent. Oh, thank you so much. I must have sounded a bit alarmed, so he continued to excuse his approach. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm actually a colleague of your father-in-law. Well, more like his boss. I've seen pictures of you from the wedding. I just thought I should introduce myself. Oh, I see. Perhaps I should have acted a little friendlier, but I couldn't bring myself to be more enthusiastic to introduce myself. To be honest, I wasn't keen to make any acquaintances with the man who worked with Joe. Joe not only ignored Nancy's abuse to me, but he let me to do all the chores, and had not even given me a single word of encouragement when I was exhausted. But the man didn't seem to mind and spoke nicely to me. I'm actually have seen you play here often. May I be bold to ask you a favor? I would like you to teach me how to play the piano. What? I exclaimed at his indeed a bold and sudden request. The man's name was Mr. Miles. He had been interested in playing piano, and since his retirement was approaching, he wanted to start practicing as a hobby. But he couldn't find a suitable piano teacher or class for seniors. When he was about to give up his quest, he found me there. Of course, I will pay the fee. Oh, but you'll be doing me the favor and making time for me, so you will certainly be paid. But I'm not sure what Joe will say. I'll speak to him myself, so don't worry about him. But it's still a nuisance, isn't it? Then I don't mean to force you. No, I would love to. I said in a hurry. The fact that if my in-laws heard about me refusing him, I didn't know what kind of harassment they were going to give me. But more than that, I was quite excited about it. I thought it was a unique opportunity to teach piano, which was my childhood dream. From then on, I gave lessons to Mr. Miles every Saturday and Sunday at a studio where we rented for the occasion. I felt bad about it as he was paying me on top of the rental fee, but he didn't seem to mind it at all. It's all for my enjoyment anyway. I look forward to the practice. Since he had been interested in playing, he sounded quite good for the first time. And the more I taught him, the more he improved, and the happier I was. Soon I began to look forward to the weekend. Joe heard about the practice from Mr. Miles, and his attitude toward me had softened a little. When he saw me preparing meals as soon as I got home from work, he began to say, "Thank you for doing that." That alone was a relief. After about 6 months, I was able to save money through my part-time job and piano lessons. So I decided to take a plunge and buy the car. The car I had been using with Tim became unavailable when my in-laws moved in. Nancy always had a priority when she went out because she was too lazy to walk, while I had to take a bus and walk with big grocery bags in both hands. I had been wanting my own car that I could use for day to day. When I finally bought it, Nancy complained a lot to me. "You spend your disposable income only on yourself. If you had so much money to buy the car, you could have spared some for us. You really don't care about us, do you? What a self-centered daughter-in-law." Ever since she moved in, she'd been living in comfort, doing nothing thanks to me. Who was more self-centered? As much as I wanted to argue, I learned to ignore her to save my energy. By this time, I had come to realize that the more I talked back, the more aggressive she became. Soon after this, she dumped raw garbage all over the car. When I told her it was Joe's boss car, she just screamed at me, "Don't lie to me." It was a fact no matter what she said. The car I bought had a problem right after and was taken by the dealer for inspection. When I told Mr. Miles about it, he offered to lend me his car. "But don't you need it too?" "Not really. I don't like driving so much." "So nice of you, but..." I contemplated. I was afraid Nancy was going to damage his car. I had been alarmed based on the past harassments and the reaction I got when I made the purchase. When I confided this to Mr. Miles, he looked really stunned. "I'm sorry that you've been going through such terrible ordeals." Then he gave me a warm smile and continued, "Well, you should take my car more than before now. Even if she did something to you, you wouldn't be in trouble. Moreover, I'll have a reason to scold at Joe." That was how I came to borrow his car. Nancy made a mess the day after he arrived. She was swelling not to lie to her. Hearing the commotion, Tim and Joe came to the garage. "What's going on?" As soon as he spoke, he noticed the car and froze there. This is Mr. Miles' car. What the hell happened to it?" "Oh my God, Mr. Miles is your boss, isn't it? Why is his car in our garage in the first place?" I answered to Tim. "Joe knows, but I've been giving piano lessons to Mr. Miles every weekend. He was kind enough to let me borrow his car while mine was away for inspection." Nancy was looking like a ghost. Tim and Joe had never imagined that she was the culprit and were both panicking. "How did this happen? Did Raccoon come inside? Anyway, we need to clean." I raised my voice and cut him short. Nancy did this. I saw her doing it. The three of them looked at me in bewilderment. "How dare you blame me?" She shrieked. "You're a liar! How could I do such a terrible thing?" "She's right. I've been taking things easy on you because of Mr. Miles. But I can't allow you to say anything that would undermine my wife." Joe sternly took her side. Tim also nodded in agreement with him and didn't even try to help me. But I had a trick up my sleeve. "Well then, let's find out. I've set up a surveillance camera. We can check and easily find out who is responsible." Again, the three of them were surprised. The one who expressed the biggest shock, to the point that her eyeballs were about to fall out, was Nancy. For what? There's been a lot of misdemeanor going on around here lately. I just bought a new car myself, and I was worried that it might be damaged. In truth, it was the measure against Nancy's harassment. I wanted to have proof in case something happened to my car.
Then, let's see now.
Joe, who seemed to believe Nancy completely, was so determined to find out who was responsible. Tim agreed.
Let's do it. But of course Nancy was not keen on it.
Wait, we should clean this up first. You're right, that's cleaning up. The recording won't disappear anyway, but probably we can't get rid of all the stains and smells even if we clean it now. Joe gave me a stern look and said,
How can you be so calm? You rented his car, so it's your responsibility. You brought shame on me.
I'm telling you, it's Nancy who did this.
Enough with your false accusation. Let's check the recording now. If you're wrong, you know there'll be a consequence.
He made a treat, but as soon as he saw the recording, his demeanor changed completely and turned pale.
Nancy, what have you done?
He asked her in a trembling voice, as if he were suppressing his anger. She responded in despair. It's not what you think. I didn't do it on purpose. You know, I'm not capable of doing such a thing. It was an accident. She stammered, and Joe grimaced at her.
You're caught on the camera. You were trying to friend me by damaging my boss' car.
That's not true.
So why did you do it? If Mr. Miles disfavored me, I don't know what will happen to my career. You know it, and yet you did it.
No, you're wrong. I never want to trouble you. I did thinking it was Maria's car. She was so upset by Joe's accusation that she dug her own grave with all her might. An awkward silence fell in the garage. You were going to do such an atrocity to me. I broke the silence, pretending to be naive. Afterwards, Joe frantically apologized to Mr. Miles. Apparently, he was severely scolded. Mr. Miles told me all about it.
I told him that his wife was the culprit in this case. But it's not irrelevant to say that he's been turning blind eye to her abuse on you. He was as much responsible as her.
And then Joe was given a demotion. I was stunned to find out he had such an authority. He wasn't just a boss of Joe, but was actually a member of the higher management. I told him that I didn't feel safe living under the same roof with Nancy and asked for a divorce. I was fortunate that I had the financial resources to take the plunge right away. I wondered myself why I put up with all this time. Tim tried to resist with all his might, but the surveillance video alone was sufficient grounds for divorce and for alimony. Joe, who was demoted, and Tim, who was divorced all because of Nancy, were pissed off. I heard they treated her with spite, and sometimes they fought all night long. As for me, I'm really refreshed to be single now. In addition, I went on to open my own private piano school using the experience from teaching Mr. Miles. I'm so fortunate to have had him as my student. Moreover, he is very satisfied with my lesson that he brings other people to the class. Piano classes are a huge success for seniors. I'm finally living a fulfilled life.